Hello and welcome back for another video on Norse mythology. And this is another video about the cosmology of the Norse world, because in addition to and including the 9 worlds, there are a few more interesting places of note in the cosmos. The places of afterlife, which are Valhalla, Folkvanger, and Hel, as well as the famous Bifrost. So before we get to the nitty-gritty of the afterlife, what is the Bifrost? And the Bifrost is the bridge that connects Asgard to Midgard, and it's guarded by a member of the Aesir tribe of gods, Heimdall. So if you'll remember, Heimdall has keen eyesight and hearing, as well as the gift of foresight, and these help him in the task of guarding the bridge. The Bifrost is actually what's foretold to be used by the giants at the coming of Ragnarok, and that's something we'll talk about at the end of the series. So now on to the nitty-gritty. When the Norse died, it was believed that they either went to Valhalla, Folkvanger, or Hel, or they were taken by either Ran or Geirfan. So the first and foremost is what most people are likely familiar with, and that's Valhalla. Valhalla was known as the Hall of the Fallen, and it was a grand place that warriors hoped to end up at after their death. Valkyries for Odin would choose the dead to bring to Valhalla. Some sources say Valhalla is in Asgard, while others allude to it being underground, but either way, it's still a grand place to end up. The gates are guarded by wolves and eagles, and the roof is made of shields with rafters as spears. The seats are breastplates, and there are many feasting tables with a boar that no matter how many times it's slaughtered and eaten, the next day, there it is again, renewed and ready to be killed and eaten again. So their deaths were much like they were in life. They would spend all day fighting and doing courageous deeds, and then at night, no matter their bumps and bruises, they would go to sleep and be restored at full health so that the next day they could go back to fighting, eating, and being brave. Interestingly enough, the warriors of Valhalla are foretold to be called upon by Odin to fight alongside him and the Valkyries during the Battle of Ragnarok. Some sources, Snorri in particular, say that those who fall in battle go to Valhalla, while those who die of old age or sickness go to Hel, although that's contradicted in his own text through the Tale of Balder, which we'll talk about later, and you can see where he contradicts himself. So how one gets to Valhalla or Hel can only be guessed upon. Either way, you'll often see Vikings in modern-day movies and TV insistent on either dying in battle or dying with a weapon in their hand. That way they can be chosen for Valhalla. But the next place we'll talk about, Folkvanger, is another place that warriors can go in their death. So Folkvanger means field of the people, and it's resided over by Freya. She chooses the warriors who come here. It's been speculated that leaders would go to Valhalla while the more common soldiers would go to Folkvanger, although we're not really sure that's how it happened, because other sources say that Freya gets the first choice, and this was a privilege bestowed upon her by Odin after the ending of the Aesir-Vanir War in order to cement their friendship and their kinship. Here's a mention of both in the Poetic Edda. Folkvang is the ninth, and there Freya arranges the choice of seats in the hall. Half the slain she chooses every day, and half Odin owns. So we don't know from this text alone whether Freya chooses first, whether Odin chooses first, and it doesn't really tell us who goes where, but we do know that half go to one place and half are said to go to another. But in addition to Valhalla and Folkvanger, there is another who could claim the lives of the dead, and that is Ran. So Ran was a giantess who lives at the bottom of the sea, and she lives among the treasures collected from the sinking and the passing ships, and those who were trapped in her nets would then spend their afterlife in her realm. In addition to Ran, another who could claim lives after death is said to be Geirfan. Geirfan is a goddess of agriculture, fertility, abundance, and prosperity, but she has tales throughout the literature highlighting her promiscuity, which is why this part is a little confusing. So Snorri, despite her tales of promiscuity throughout the text, claimed that women who died a virgin would go to Geirfan upon their death. While this is just another way that he contradicts himself in the text, I figured it would be worth mentioning because you can see something similar happening through different religions and different mythology. Finally, those who die may also be taken to Hell, ruled by Hel herself. Hel, if you'll remember from the previous video, is located underground within the roots of the Yggdrasil. What's most important to note about Hel in Norse mythology is that the Vikings had no concept of reward and punishment or heaven and hell, so going to Hel didn't necessarily mean to them what it would mean to us. That's to say, one wouldn't necessarily end up in Hel based on their lack of moral compass in life. In addition, Hel of Norse mythology is nothing like the Hel that we've come to know. In the literature, it was often talked about in neutral or sometimes even positive terms. So those who reside in Hel often spend their death, just like Valhalla, living the same way they did in life. So they would eat, sleep, fight, and so on. That's all to say that ending up here didn't mean eternal damnation and misery like it does in the Christian world. The only source that does describe Hel as a terrible place is the one and only Snorri. And like with many of his contradictory statements, it's again believed because of the Christian influence that his writing seems to have. So there you have it, several places a Viking could end up after their death. So from here on out, we'll spend the next several videos tying in the people and places we've learned so far, as well as learning more, all while discussing how these work together in the Norse cosmological world. And the first on the agenda is going to be the creation of the cosmos and of the first humans, so stay tuned. Shelby, fuck you.